to it. If you scroll down a little bit more, there is a list of, here are some terrible impacts that can occur if you use this incorrectly. I did validate how this impacts in the debugging cases. Mixed mode debugging is impacted negatively in certain scenarios. I've spoken to Visual Studio as well as the runtime diagnostics team. They're okay with this. This attribute is not intended to be used by many people. This is a very advanced feature.
What happens if you get it wrong?
Okay, so let's say the attribute is applied to a function that that will actually have something bad in it. Any number of them. You can starve the GC, so you'll get weird hiccups. You could crash. Absolutely possible if you do something wonky in there. If you try and transition back, so let's say one function takes in a callback, you store it, and then you call another native function, and you go down through it, it's like, oh, I stored that delegate, and try to call back into the runtime. It'll crash. We will propagate an appropriate error, because we do already have mechanisms to check that. So we throw a well-defined exception, but you'll hear it on the process.
Like as in because you said you suppress GC transitions, you're not allowed to do this kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. So if you try to, by entering it without a GC transition, the runtime thinks you're still in the runtime. So calling back into the runtime is like,
what did you get?
How did you get it? Like I haven't left. How can I get back in? I don't understand. So that's kind of the
And that's tracked per thread?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, okay. Yep. Just wanted to make sure that you couldn't be in a scenario where you call in and then some other thread calls back.
So the question I asked, I don't think it was ever answered. What happens if there's a page fault? Because one of the things you say don't do is any type of I/O.
Yes. I can't detect that. There's no way to detect that. That would be my statement. I don't know how that would. I don't even know how I would. I mean, nothing would happen that I know of.
So what is the guidance around not performing any sort of blocking or any type of I/O?
Basically, those are basically syscalls that can have blocking I/O. That like actual reading a file from a disk, hitting a network or any kind of can't be done. If you scroll down, I did get some feedback from people regarding. Right there. The pinbook method, that attribute, those are the 5 things that I don't like. If you're familiar from the runtime side of things, fcall. This is basically identical to an fcall in the runtime. So anything that we couldn't do in an fcall, we can't do here.
So is anyone other than system private correlate expected?
Yes, sure. They can. if they would like to, as I said, let's say, for instance, they want to hit, there's some sort of very specific inline assembly that they want. It's doing something. I have no idea what it would be. That's what they want. It is very limited, kind of what you're getting at. There are some Win32 APIs that I think Jeremy Kuhn has found that he would be interested in consuming. Levi's mentioned some things about calling into ICU or UTF work.
So because I was going to start with, should this just be another property on DLL import? Since it only works with DLL import. And you're like, this is very advanced. We want to hide it from people.
It likely won't only work within the future. Jan's already called out. We need to make sure this works with.
Yes, yeah. And I was actually about to ask, why does it say attribute targets method instead of delegate?
And then, so then the continued is, should this just be the declare an attribute in this namespace, and when you hit the namespace qualified name, you get the behavior, and we never make this public? So it's if this is no one can reason about it who doesn't work in this building, then don't add it to public API, but add the support in the runtime. If it's the average person can reason about how to use it, then maybe it can be public. And if this is a super common thing, then it should be on DLL import.
So putting on DLL import would make so that's like a pseudo attribute, right? So it's actually built into the metadata, so it's not really an attribute.
Yeah,
so it would require changing. So I would love to do that. Absolutely love to do it. There are bits available. Changing metadata, as you probably imagine, is a non-trivial exercise. So would love to do it, but there's not much appetite for that.
Okay.
So an attribute was decided upon. Function pointers is the other side of this.
Yeah.
How function pointers are going to be represented isn't obvious, and a delegate implies a lot more than what a function pointer would be. There's no way to put an attribute on an actual function pointer, as I understand it. Yet.
Right.
Not like the proposal, not the delegate concept.
So the scenario that I'm thinking of is in 3.0 we introduced the native library API, which allows you to basically load library and then get a bunch of function pointers out of it.
Yep.
Is it possible for me to say I have a function pointer, I want to p-invoke, I also want to suppress GC transitions during this p-invoke?
Interop with DirectX would be another
Or
common scenario.
ICU, as we had spoken about earlier.
Right. COM interop. This does not impact COM interop at present. There is, as you can see, there's no reason that you couldn't put this on a COM interop function.
Well, so when I say COM interop, I'm not talking about and I'm talking about you manually declare a V table with int pointers that you then marshal to delegate and invoke that way. Which is the way like SharpDX and others do it. Or via call I.
So put that. Well, it would be via call I, and the problem with the call. So delegates, I don't believe we're going to be able to make that work because there's a lot of implications. There's a lot of things that are implied in that delegate. You can't necessarily peer through what you are calling. So that's very difficult. The function pointer proposal that is being pushed out, there is no way at present to add an attribute, right? Because there's no concept there. So there's been you want a mod rec or a mod opt on those things. How do they get projected? So attributes wouldn't even make any sense in that case. So solving that particular problem is something that we would have to defer. We can't really do that. So this is very much tailored to the DLL import itself.
For delegates, could we not just say it only applies to ones that also have unmanaged function call attribute on them? The one that allows you to specify the calling conventions for delegate and it's
unmanaged function pointer attribute.
Yeah. System.Runtime.Intrinsics service is unmanaged, and it allows you to specify preserved sig, calling convention, and everything else for the purposes of a marshaled function pointer wrapped in a delegate.
It's basically DLL import.
Yeah. But for delegates.
But for get proc address.
I see. I guess I would have to look at it to actually know more about it. But that wouldn't necessarily address the DLL import center.
No, but the same attribute that works on both.
Yeah. So it will be attribute targets.method or attribute targets.delegate.
And then you could likewise have a comment like this one says it only applies to DLL import. You could also likewise say this only applies to delegates with unmanaged function pointer attribute.
Okay, I would have to look at that other attribute and play with it. But okay, that seems right now reasonable. I don't know how that translates to the function pointer proposal. That's something that we're going to have to look at later on how that actually gets marked.
I would imagine the compiler team would need to do mod opt, that way it doesn't impact overload resolution. But we can talk with Jared about that.
But from an implementation standpoint, that is handled. It's just that it probably wouldn't be this attribute, or if it was, I don't know where it would go.
I assume that the code that is driving this is looking for an attribute by name and not by type ID.
Yep.
So then it's if this is expected to be extremely rare, is putting it in the public surface area, setting people up for failure, at which point you have to declare this inside your own assembly is just another hurdle that the people who can use it correctly are willing to accept. Therefore, it shouldn't be public API.
I don't necessarily know how that works from a library perspective, mainly because if you declare it in a library that you're consuming and you also declare it, what are the semantics there?
Well, they would both, like, we have cases where this happens, but basically the guidance would be they would have to copy and paste effectively the attribute and make it internal.
Well, that would also mean that the VM during type loading now has to check every attribute rather than just looking for attributes that exist in private core lib.
But it's
Which
already doing
is-
find by name. Then
Well, it's doing find by name based on core lib, based on its existence in core lib, right?
I don't know. I don't believe that that's true. No, it's not. It's not doing it.
It just looks for every attribute attached to. That seems expensive for the type loader, and Jan's previously pushed back against us doing that.
I mean, that's how every light up feature works. So that the
No, that-
compiler
that-
does the stuff that works backwards.
That's how the C# compiler works. That's not how the JIT's been working. The JIT explicitly, like the intrinsic attribute, you can't define it anywhere. It has to be an intrinsic attribute in core lib because type lookup on every attribute from every assembly anywhere is expensive.
Well, you wouldn't do that, but you would just look at all attributes that are applied to the method and compare by name. Basically.
Right, which is expensive to do because you're doing a string comparison rather than a does this.
Right, but you can't cache it once you have it, right?
And that's just in the.
And this is only like, yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying here. I guess the thing that I would mention is that is a one-time JIT cost. Like, I'm going to be doing this anyways. Usually a p-invoke is going to be expensive, so basically sacrificing, putting a little more time on that lookup, but it's going to be faster at the steady state level. So that's great feedback. That's a completely legitimate argument.
I mean, my concern is more about I think the user experience might be even like I would say in general I would prefer having centralized APIs that are problematic rather than distributed problematic APIs because then you can also probe for them more easily, right? Like if people like copy and paste the offending stuff everywhere, then I think we're in a worse world. I mean, the question really is like, do you need anybody outside of core lib right now? Because I mean, to Jeremy's point, right? If we once we I mean, generally speaking, when we features like this, we kind of want to have people using it for a while to actually get a sense for, does it work? Like, what are the caveats? How do we document this? And especially that we already brought up function pointers where it's unclear how this would work at all. Maybe there's once we get closer with function pointers in C#9 or whatever the version number ends up being, maybe then it's a better time to make it public. Like, I mean, like, do you need an API right now because you already know of an external consumer?
So external as in outside of the Microsoft like Teams.
Well, yeah, outside of realistically core lib, probably, yeah.
I don't know where Levi would put yours or where Jeremy would put his.
I thought we had query performance frequency and query performance counter, which are on diagnostic stopwatch, which are not in core lib today.
Oh, system private core lib? Yeah, I would believe there would be places outside of that.
Yeah, like
Effects.
core effects, there will be places we
Yeah.
would want to do it.
Yeah.
But core effects is special because we can reference these APIs.
And if it's
That's fair, probably.
yeah,
Even
sure,
though-
because we could have it public in core lib, but not in the ref set.
Yeah.
But the
But do we compile against core lib? I thought we compile generally
places
against
that
the
need to
contract.
do, if you're inbox.
Yeah.
But
That's why I said, like, that's why I don't see
But if
core
it's
effects
doing
needing
find
this
by
as a
name,
strong
then
argument.
anything that
Fair
is in that extra set can always just declare the attribute itself as an internal.
It's also not uncommon to want to write your own, for example, query performance counter and frequency APIs, because up until 3.0, the implementation from system stopwatch wasn't the most efficient. And so those people would likely want to be able to use this in the same scenario.
Right, but again, my point is just if we don't expect very many people are going to do it, and all the people who are going to do it are hellaciously smart people, then this being internal is zero cost to them.
So there is discussion on the original issue about game scripting engines potentially using this, but I
Yes.
don't have enough.
Unity
knowledge.
is interested. Wow.
Would they be interested in this or in the call-I work that's being done, or both?
I think both. This is one of those things where people had talked about the actual idea because it is an F-call.
Okay.
No itself has already said that they are just waiting to implement it because they're interested in it. They have customers as well.
So that is a that is a customer scenario. Especially if they would, because if they would just go solely to call I instead of this, then that's less of an argument for adding this. But if you think they're going to support, that they're going to want both, then
Yeah, because call I does not stop the frame. It still is going to put that on there.
right.
This is further optimization on top of the call I.
Yeah, I could see externals wanting this in.
Like, if we think it needs to be public, sure. I'm just, like, this is a scary thing.
It is absolutely scary.
It's the big long scary, and this is the if we can leave it internal, then that is less scary.
But it is under interop services, which already defines DLL import, which itself is scary. So, well, scary in the sense that, like, how many times have you gotten DLL import wrong in your life? Probably far too many.
This seems much less clear
Yeah.
in usage compared to DLL.
Like, I really wish that we would just take the ECMA hit and change DLL import, but
I mean, my other question is, do we have other cases like
This
this?
needs to apply in two places.
Can you elaborate?
Like, as in, do we have any other customer attributes that basically indicates the runtime special marshalling behavior when you call into a pinvoke?
Well, there's iCustom Marshaller. It's an interface that you can implement on how to marshal a specific.
No, I meant like literally customer attributes. So basically, are there other things like it where referencing or referencing the metadata would be sensible for?
Yeah, the search path order and I mean anything that is on a P invoke.
Well,
Search path order is the only
we
thing I
exposed native library loader to address that, and that didn't necessarily need it. I think the big thing that isn't necessarily addressed today that has the embedded metadata today, but where we need to expand it is calling conventions. And that's been a long-standing issue, and I think Jan has had existing ideas about that.
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I had a couple questions. I've heard several people express the desire for this to be on DLL import and also saying that DLL import seems safer, but I question that. I mean, DLL import, you can get so many things wrong with it, and maybe not GC starvation, but you can cause runtime termination, you can cause stack overflow, you can cause data corruption. You can cause all these things super easily just by having a type wrong in your signature. And putting this as an attribute on as a property on DLL import would, in my opinion, actually make it more prominent, because someone's going to type DLL import open paren and it's going to immediately be one of the options for them to add, whereas you have to kind of think to go and add this attribute in addition to the DLL import.
So it's not in your face, making it more likely for you to use it accidentally, is your point?
Right.
That was my question.
Yeah, I mean, the number, like with DLL import, people often will go through and say, like, for each thing, they'll go and figure out what they want to set it to, and this will just be one of the other options. Oh, I need to set that to true, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's less about likelihood of getting it wrong or right. It's more like avoiding, like, basically having, like, Franken designs just because we can't do the right thing. So I was just wondering whether there's other instances where we just didn't want to bite the bullet of revving the metadata. Because if we have enough of them and we batch them up, then maybe that's not a big of a deal. But, like for just one thing, it doesn't make sense to just do the extraordinary effort to, like, put another bit in metadata, right?
Got it. I don't know of anything else other than calling conventions at the DLL import level would be interesting.
I mean, the other question then really is, what do we do with unmanaged? With raw function pointers. Like, but that's...
Right, but that's the question. That's the general question of how do you attach attributes to function pointers, and the answer is probably going to be modopt or some metadata and private implementation details, and that's future work. But if it's going to be an attribute, it would probably end up being, just attaching this attribute via modopt.
The other thing, this like very specifically tells you exactly what we're doing. So if you scroll up a little, there are two proposals that kind of, a little bit more, sorry. Right, that give a little bit different take on it. Basically, what are you trying to convey rather than what do you want us to do? And that is the trivial unmanaged method attribute or the limited unmanaged method as far as naming conventions. Because this one tells you this is what we're doing, not necessarily what you're trying to accomplish. So that's another consideration.
I think that whatever the first version, like if we called this trivial unmanaged method attribute and we found like 3 things to squirrel into it for the 5 release, at anything beyond 5, we would be afraid to add to it. So we should just be, I think that the clarity of suppress the GC, and then whatever other 5 things we come up with, but like, fine, just stack all your attributes.
I mean, from a philosophy standpoint, I like the idea that you have a feature that you can evolve over time without having to expose more API surface. But I think for marshalling in particular, do you honestly think that if there's other things in the runtime that we could do, like to let you optimize more stuff, that we would turn this on just because you said, oh, this is a trivial API? Or would you rather have people like specifically say, oh, I know what the trade-offs are, I know what the limitations are, and I specifically tell the runtime, don't do this, don't do that.
I fully agree with you. That's why I named it the way that I did. I don't like the fact that I didn't want to hide it behind something, but those were other options that I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, so I think if we think that there's enough justification for making it public, suppress GC transition sounds like a reasonable name.
And if we did want to make this work with unmanaged function pointer attribute in the future, then we would just change attribute targets to include delegate as well, and we don't have to bring this back for review.
So what if we would do what?
So if you scroll down,
Yeah.
It has attribute targets method right now, and that's it. If we wanted to make this attribute work with unmanaged function pointer attribute as well, then we could have attribute targets.method or attribute targets.delegate. We could just make that change without bringing it back through API review.
But I don't think they're considered delegates.
No, this is for delegates marked with unmanaged function pointer attribute.
Yes.
Which is respected during marshal.get delegate for function.
Oh, so
which is separate from actual function pointers,
Yes.
which also need this.
It's the way that today you do pinvoke.
okay.
through
Then
regular
let's
pointers.
ignore function pointers for a moment.
Yeah.
Then
But what I'm saying is I'm saying there's very likely to be a change that's going to require that attribute to change.
yeah. So all I'm saying is like if okay, let's ignore function pointers for a moment. Just for the unmanaged function pointer attribute that already exists in delegates,
Yes.
should we enable this thing? Yes or no?
I think it doesn't make sense for it to work with DLL import only and not also unmanaged function pointer attribute, because everything else that we have works with both.
I think it would need to be vetted to actually work and the code actually be in the CLR
Yes.
before we add
Oh, yeah.
metadata.
And Jan saying whether or not there's anything crazy that
But
would
from
break.
from a
Well, because
future,
it would be a
yeah.
super scary thing if we
Yeah.
put the attribute usage here and didn't have backing support for it,
Oh, yeah.
and in a future
Yeah.
version turned it on, because now things that never had this behavior start getting
Right.
it.
What I'm
So-
what I'm getting at is it's this would be unique in that we would be introducing a new public API that
Yeah.
that purports to be symmetric but only works on one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if in my opinion, if this can be proven to work on that thing as well, and the features written adding the delegate usage is let's call it tell mode.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
Well, there is a let's say another caveat to the delegate concept. This could cause like a propagation of those types of, particularly about delegates. So let's say I declare my pinvoke like this, and then I have a delegate I've named, and then I assign my pinvoke to that. I can't do that an instance of that delegate. I can't peer through my delegate and see that I have assigned a pinvoke.
Correct.
And so, from that perspective, it would require the propagation of this GC attribute, and so you would need to put it on your you need to put it on your pinvoke.
Mm-hmm.
You could put it on your delegate. At which point, if you didn't put it on your pinvoke, now your delegate says, "I'm going to be pointing at this," and you can assign any DLL import to it, and I will remove it. At which point, you're kind of hiding the actual implementation, because if you just have a delegate type. Well, is it any type, any DLL import that I assign to it? Now I'm trumping the actual implementation, which is the DLL import.
So your experience might be different, but in my experience, when people declare a delegate type to represent a pinvoke that's not known until runtime, like they really only ever assign one thing and one thing only.
Yeah, because
That's true, but in this case, you could assign any implementation to it.
Well-
and you don't necessarily...
But people don't in practice.
yeah, the way it works in practice is you don't assign a pinvoke to a delegate. You have a function that returns an int pointer, and you call marshal get delegate for function pointer type of t, where that t is a delegate that's been marked with unmanaged function pointer, and you pass in the function pointer back.
That's great in practice. What I'm getting at
because if you
is
assign a p invoke, that's a managed call to the managed stub that goes to the p invoke.
agreed, but you are still hiding what I can assign to it, and you are applying semantics to a indeterminate thing.
Isn't that any different than declaring like a calling convention on the delegate itself? You can assign anything to it.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. It's just, I guess what I'm getting at is you're stepping away from the actual, I've declared this, I know exactly how this thing works, I know exactly this implementation. By putting it on a delegate, you're stepping away from it.
I guess as an alternative, you could say extend Marshall get delegate for function pointer to take a bool suppress GC attribute, since that is what actually does the suppression and the generation of the stub method.
Sure.
That's fair.
That one I would say probably should be flagged for a flag xenum, instead of bool, because
Sure. But taking it at the interface, I would be far more.
Yeah.
But we
That's
could
fine.
probably discuss that more after, and we can open an issue separate from this and tag Jan and Aaron and everyone on how should we address it for this scenario.
Wouldn't that
As long as the scenario is achievable, whatever.
isn't so with the native library?
Yeah, because that's it.
Right. So you're not talking about the function pointers. You're really just talking about the delegates coming from Marshall dot.
Yes.
Right, because that's how you do function pointers today without IL rewriting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Call load library, call get proc address, call Marshall get delegate for function.
Right. Okay. So that's all right. Yeah, I would be more inclined to say that should be a bool or an enum or something.
Yeah.
Fine by me.
I would say that one would, even if there's only ever one bit defined in it, that seems very likely to be this Boolean will get more options in the future.
I agree.
So I would just say it should be flagged.
So which one are you talking about? What is the boolean you're referring to?
If we go down the case of instead of putting the attribute on the delegate, we were to put it on the API that gives you the.
Okay.
So it's it's a downstream of this, and it's a future API proposal.
Yeah.
It's propagating it in a different way.
Yeah.
But it directly falls out of this app. Which is fine.
Unless you can come up with if there's a pressing scenario right now, we can.
Well, I mean, that's probably going to be the game scenario because you're going to different things probably based on what OS you're running. I mean, that's the entire reason we introduced native library in the first place, because you need to load different DLLs based on
Right. But with function pointers, does that change that calculus?
I don't know.
So, all right. What I'm hearing is we're not holding off then. We'll approve the APIs is we believe there is reason for this API to be public. Which I think we said earlier. So I also tagged the compiler guys on the function pointer side. And then I think we can move ahead.
Edit them?
What? How would I check this? I don't know how to. I actually don't know how to
You are in the happy position that you have to touch the core assemblies, which means you have to do this dance where you add the API, and add the implementation, then add the API, and
The API is already there, isn't it?
Yeah, so
Is
it
it
needs to
API?
be public in CoreLib. That needs to flow to CoreFX. You
Yep.
need to update the relevant reference assembly that contains DLL import. I think it's System Runtime. Once that's been updated in CoreFX, you have to wait for it to flow back to Core CLR, and then all of that to flow to Core Setup, and then it's publicly
Yeah.
available.
or
So
you wait
it's-
3 months and you do it in your repo, and it's all easy.
So it's already checked in to
Yes.
Core CLR,
Okay.
which means that CoreFX already has a build with us. So all we have to do It was 8 days ago. CI has been flowing.
My last PR that I tried to get in took over 8 days to close. So
Never mind. If you need assistance, just ping any of us and we can help.
Okay. So so the other thing then is the documentation, which I just put up there because that's how I think about
Yeah,
it.
that's how we do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually what ends up happening is that becomes the template for whatever doc writer wants to tackle that. But given that Ron just retired, I'm not clear who the next person will be that does
I
it.
have been getting a bunch of someone
Essentially,
after Ron.
This will go, and then because it's in runtime, I'll get pinged, and I'll go, it looks like the feature, or the person who wrote the feature wrote the doc, so approved.
Yeah.
So this will be the public documentation.
Yeah, which is fine.
Then you're done. You're welcome to stick around, but
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
You can watch us rat hole on Tanner's proposal.
Oh, what's your
Unsafe.SkipInit.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Half an hour for an attribute. I think that's new record slow.
Jesus. Well, it's a runtime change. I don't feel too bad.
It's a GC change.
All right. So then,
We should look at a 38585.
3, 8, 5.
I just say no now.
So
Is this-
is this really important? Because otherwise, I would rather go oldest to newest because we keep not doing that.
Well, the first oldest ones are ones that they're also mine, and we keep on pushing them back.
No, the in PDR I don't care about because
Well,
it's
that one's,
different thing.
that one's actually unblocked now.
So this one, 38585, we had already tentatively approved it pending customer scenarios, and we have customer scenarios.
Yeah, Jan had given the scenarios of where we're going to use it in course
Fine, be
VLR,
like that.
etc.
Like, we should just bite the bullet and say yes.
I can literally paste in what you just said and approve it.
Yeah. I would be fine with that.
What you would-
Basically, the only question is, should we make this where T is unmanaged? So if it's a struct and it's not unmanaged, the JIT will still zero out any of the reference fields. So unmanaged is much more accurate into what this will actually apply.
Managed.
We've previously said don't do it because it only works on C# like 7.3 and later.
Yeah.
But now that we're not porting APIs back to older targets and we're saying newer language versions are only officially supported on 4 anyways.
I see.
Yeah. Let's make it more constrained.
Yeah. Especially since you would never use this with generics, like you always know the concrete type going in here.
Right. And you need to because you need to know that.
So this is just this is a thing that you call that the JIT's gonna just say like this is stupid and delete it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the method's completely empty. It's literally just a ret instruction, so it should be fully elided and dropped.
So it just it confuses the compiler and makes it think DA's been set.
Right.
Sorry, I'm confused. Like, how do you use this API?
Unsafe.SkipInit out my struct value.
So right now,
Now definite assignment is satisfied without you assigning default and paying the 0 cost before the field right.
Which avoids multiple writes
Oh.
for union
I
types
see.
where you're using field offset.
But that means it only works for locals, right? It doesn't work for
Correct.
anything else.
Right.
Okay.
Well, technically, it
fields as
also
well,
works
but-
for fields of structs in making the JIT think, or in making the compiler think it's been definitely assigned. So you could do out this for the
Sure.
union type in the constructor. If you've got a method that says, I'm only initializing this particular tag of the union.
that's clever, but that's the intent.
Yeah. Use the unmanaged constraint and then
What does it mean again? It means that the thing doesn't contain any reference types,
Yeah, unmanaged means it contains no reference types.
but it can be any struct of any other struct.
Yeah, it can be any struct containing any other structs. Pool, car, int, float, double.
Does unmanaged imply struct, or do you
Yes.
have to say struct?
It implies struct.
You can just state where t colon unmanaged. What happens if we ever find out that we want it for regular structs with reference types? Is it that we can't do it anyways, or we just don't want to?
What would happen is it would get zero initialized, so this method would be pointless.
And also, as I called out, so there's the skip locals init attribute, which is coming, which avoids zeroing a struct in general. Whereas this one is meant for union types, where the JIT currently thinks it has to write each field, even though fields overlap in memory. You can't overlap reference types or generics with field offset, so this doesn't really apply to those scenarios.
Why would this be more useful for? Maybe I'm slow, but like
if you have a union type with field offset, you might have 4 or 5 fields that all overlap at offset 0. Yes. Currently, the JIT and the C# compiler think it has to write each field to zero it out. And so you end up writing bytes 0 through 4 5 times to zero it, zeroing it each time. This allows you to avoid that.
Oh,
and it allows you to only write the fields you're actually using because you know how you're utilizing the union.
We had spoken with the JIT folks, and we were wondering like if they would just be able to make this change directly in the JIT so that we wouldn't necessarily need this API. But apparently doing that work is untenable right now.
Also seems like C# maybe should have a motion for.
They don't want to have to understand union types and field offsets, and then they can't really, because when you get into cross architecture and
they should not directly understand the layouts, but like having a first class representation for this is either this or that should be pretty straightforward to understand it.
But we could review the conversation from last time we reviewed this because we had all these same discussions. And the conclusion was tentatively approved pending customer scenarios.
I mean, we will not get any C# syntax anytime soon for this. So, but even if we do, it's just one method that's no longer relevant. Right. Right. So then, done with that.
41784.
What about it?
It's trivial, so it might only take 40 minutes.
So 41784. Make type implement IEquatable, is that?
Yeah, and Jan's the one who marked it ready for review, so let's just hit go.
Oh yeah, it was strange that it didn't do this already. I think it was because, I want to say the reason for this is because there's an actual hierarchy inside reflection, so type implement, or type inherits like member inherits blah blah blah. And do you make everything all the way up and down the chain IEquatable of T? So does member info become IEquatable of member info, for instance?
Type isn't a member info. Type isn't a member.
Yes, type is a member info.
It is?
Yeah, because types can contain types.
Yeah, implement type. So does member info become IEquatable member info? Like that's stuff like that.
I mean, in general, you would re-implement the interface in the hierarchy because otherwise you have weird semantics.
I've never seen IEquatable on a type hierarchy. That's the thing that makes it. That's not a reason not to do it. It's just strange.
Error question, so bounce this back to whoever owns the function, which is Steve Harder. So need to work.
And me.
Yeah.
Apparently.
I knew it was going to be easy. Either easy yes or easy no.
I mean, Reflection realistically has not seen a lot of the generics.
Actually, member info doesn't even have an equals member info, so it wouldn't be IEquatable member info. So at that point, I don't care. Like make this IEquatable type. Fine by me.
Sure, but what about method info? Like all the other leaf nodes. I mean, member node is a. I think it's a fair question of like what happens to the other things.
I assume this question is that type already has type.equals type. And
It does, yes.
So what this duck type meets the interface, can we just declare it as meeting the interface? Only APIs of .NET would be.
Your time.
Works for me.
You're hitting the wrong server. What about the other types in the member info hierarchy?
So if type.equals type. Of course, it said it takes nullable or a nullable type. So I don't know what that does with the interface IEquatable and I guess we said IEquatable.
the PR already.
Yeah, but Jan also commented asking why we did unmanaged. He thinks we should just keep it as struct.
Why?
He says it makes the method less useful for no good reason. Nothing else on Unsafe is constrained that way.
I don't see anybody needing to use it, and we can change the generic constraint in the future. Only a compiler limitation. I don't think the runtime cares. My answer is unsafe should be as unusable as possible. So.
Yeah, that's not Jan's philosophy though.
Yeah.
Jan is a very simple philosophy, like make things useful or make them unsafe, and once you're an unsafe, do whatever the fuck you want. Which is not
actually
entirely
true. Isn't it a breaking change to remove the constraint?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. It's not a breaking change because you can't forward the constraint. You basically, like if you call the method, it just means you're generic yourself, it just means you have to declare yourself as unmanaged. And then this way, if we remove it, well, you're just overly constrained on the call side now. But I mean, it's not a breaking change to move a constraint from a non-virtual method like that.
It's source breaking to go from struct to unmanaged, but is it also source breaking to go from unmanaged struct? I think is the question.
This is all unmanaged source structs, and
Right, but
constraints can't be used for overload resolution.
I don't remember if the C# compiler in some scenarios emits unmanaged as a mock-wrap. That might just be virtual methods.
I'm pretty sure it's virtual because this way you have to.
I guess I don't super care. Whatever.
All right, backlog.
And the point is that structs, there are structs that you can pass it into that it's
Like
that
it
it's
would
not doing anything. So like understanding this as having no effect on your type is.
Right.
It might just be that they only zero out the reference types and not all fields, in which case it would still be applicable to those types if you had something where the value types were overlapped in the reference types were.
41695 approved.
All right. So we have not obsoleted stuff realistically, so let's ignore the problems of obsolescence for a moment, but like just from a practical standpoint, anything wrong with doing that?
I mean, you have a clear replacement API.
Yeah, I think it's a one-to-one replacement, and CodeBase is just bad.
Does it come back in the same format, like an actual path as opposed to a file URL or something like that?
You mean location?
Yeah.
Location was always an actual path.
Okay.
CodeBase was always the one that had the weird URL because it handled the intranet and other weird zones, right?
Does Core CLR support loading assemblies from the network? As in, like, I have a manifest and I need to download a module over, like, HTTP or whatever?
I think in this case you just have the same semantics that you get from assembly from a byte array, you just don't have a location. It's basically empty. And like the only reason why we care about a location in this case was for security, so that we know that it was loaded from the internet rather than some other.
It was part of the whole evidence thing.
Which we don't care about, right? Once you got an assembly, how you got it, we don't care.
He's okay with us submitting things.
Who said that?
Oh, well, Barry said Jock said.
Well, I mean, obsoleting is more like our call. I think the more problematic call was the ability to remove APIs, which I'm much less keen on. Yeah. Barry still thinks we can remove stuff, but I think that's.
Hey, I obsoleted string.copy in 3.0, and I'm pleased that people actually signed off on that.
And so far, nobody called us out on it, right?
Yeah.
The only concern that I have is how many people use actually Assembly.CodeBase. Probably a decent bit. It's 30%, so it is when people get a warning, but I think that's fine.
Well, the one library that 30% of applications use will get a warning.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, honestly, though, people do crazy stuff with CodeBase. Usually, it's like for locating things in the output folder, right?
But 30% of all .NET applications, I guarantee, do not call assembly.code. Like 30% of our developer audience did not.
Yeah. All right. Somebody's asking, are there any standard rules for marking something as obsolete? Has marking something unsupported or uncore obsolete considered?
I know there were questions about how it affects standard.
Well, I don't think he's asking for the insanity. He's just saying standard / rule, like as in guidelines.
As a practical thing, if we're marking something as obsolete, we want to also mark it as editor browsable something.
Editor browsable never?
Never, advanced, whatever. Or do we leave it and then you write .CodeBase and or you see it in IntelliSense, you call it, and then it tells you no.
What I would probably recommend is we go to the VS team and say, can you change IntelliSense not to recommend things that are marked obsolete? Just pretend they're all editor browsable never. That way we don't have to attribute every place.
You can do that too, but I mean,
I'm just asking as a practical thing. We've not done too many yet.
no, I think this is a good example. Like we probably should. I mean, the problem with obsoleting things is that I think for members, I can probably be convinced that marking them editor browsable is not too bad. The problem when you mark types, it gets annoying because if you still have to use them and then they're always hidden, that sucks. And then another question is, inside of a region where you said, you know, park my suppress, whatever the warning indicator for obsolete is, do I see this thing now or not?
I mean, this is probably rat holing, but the recommendation that I would give to the VS team is like, if someone has used a member or a type somewhere in the project that's marked obsolete, show it everywhere in IntelliSense because they're obviously still using it. If they haven't referenced it at all in the project, hide it from IntelliSense.
It was what you're arguing that we don't mark anything and we just let it go.
Right. Because editor browsable never is all just IntelliSense anyway, and we control IntelliSense, we can always make it smarter. Even like without attributes.
Yeah.
It's a good consideration.
Yeah, let me think about that. Like I have it on my list to make obsolation better for 5.0. I already have a proposal written up, and actually the IntelliSense is an interesting issue. But like, yeah, from our point of view, the biggest problem with obsolation is that it's a pretty heavy hammer. And you can't really targetedly oppress it today, which makes it annoying.
Yeah, there are also like various degrees of obsolation, right? Like there's obsolation as in like this is an API that we want to steer people away from, versus this is an API that will not work in that we really need to get people off of AS.
I mean, in general, like obsoleting like particular methods is relatively straightforward, right? Because the only people that are affected are the actual people using this one API. Yeah. Where it really starts to suck is when you want to obsolete technologies, like let's say WCF or, you know, but let's say, you know, binary serialization, right? Which is a set of types, right? And some of them are used in more than one scenario, some of them are only used in this, and then when you mark the whole thing, then the problem is now you get hundreds and hundreds because you have to, you know, pass these types through your project. So like that's That's not great.
Yeah.
Right, so let me refresh this list here. All right, let's try to go all the streams now that we have.
Do we see the?
Not easily, because then I give up on my screen.
We'll just start reading numbers.
41783.
How about this one here? That's the oldest one we currently have. From Steven. Steven, are you still with us? No. Then don't tackle this one because Steven is gone.
To say,
Do you need Steven?
Well, he filed it, so.
Can you just do it?
But if you want to talk to it, sure.
Sure. So this issue basically blocks our ability to do duplex streaming and cancel it properly. So there's a method which basically copies streams between, but because we don't have a public API to pass the cancellation through, then cancellation doesn't work. I don't know if it makes sense. So we basically, we did some hacks for 3.0 to sort of make it work for the built-in streams. But if you basically derive your custom content stream, then basically we bust cancellation because there's a step where we basically lose the cancellation token. So the proposal is just to add cancellation so we can propagate it properly all the way down to the streams from HTTP.
Makes complete sense to me, yeah.
So the guidance that we have for async is cancellation token should be defaulted. I don't know how I feel about that on protected because we also haven't finished what our guidance is. And then I would take the existing abstract API, make it virtual to call the other one, and then make the virtual implementation thrown at it.
Stuff like that I've never been a fan of because now
We don't want people to see that they should override the one that doesn't take cancellation.
No,
That's the wrong answer.
I understand that, but I'm thinking back to the same problems we had when we introduced data annotations, like back in the 4x timeframe, where people didn't know which method to override because when they go to Visual Studio, say implement abstract class, like it doesn't override any of them anymore because nothing's abstract anymore. And now all of a sudden, like you F5 your project and it just fails at runtime, and you don't know why. Like it becomes very weird.
Well, so anybody who's already implemented it will get, like, if they've already overridden the thing and that's what gets called, then that's what gets called. They'll have to, but leaving the existing method abstract just means that somebody is always forced to write this defers to the other one.
Yeah, which is a shame.
So we should just write that one for them, and then the only thing that the base one can do the it can do the reflection test of did you derive this, like did you derive the previous one? Okay, fine, I'll call you and ignore the cancellation token, which is what we've done in most of the stream things. If each layer figures out which one it's supposed to call.
So you basically, but I don't think we can implement the abstract one as throwing because that would be pretty bad because now you force everybody to override both for eternity.
No, so the abstract one should just call the other one. So the old abstract becomes virtual, call the new one. The new one then either is just implemented as throw, or it's implemented as if the other one is implemented at a level that is not HTTP content, then invoke it. Otherwise, though.
Yeah, that one makes sense. But logically, you want people that derive HTTP content moving forward to just override the one that takes cancellation token.
Right. So make this one virtual, editor browsable, potato. Whether that's advanced or never. Or what, like.
But what's the benefit of making it editor browsable?
You don't see it when you write override.
Yeah.
Sure, but how's it different from calling another API where it's defaulted? Like calling the API seems fine.
No, we don't want you to override. So it's protected, and it's not public. So it's the only time you would see this is when you write the word override.
Oh, I see.
And so we want to tell you this is not the one to override.
Yeah, but I'm still thinking of a scenario where like public class my HTTP content : HTTP content, right click, implement abstract class. Like, the template now does not include everything that I actually need to implement in order to be successful.
The only way
Right
we
now-
can do that is if we make the new one abstract. Like
Which we can't.
this is failure.
Yeah.
This we should not show. We either take the breaking change and move or make the abstract a cancellation token. We take the breaking change and make the new thing the abstract, or we do what we've done for every other type, and this is better than stream because no one should be extending this.
HTTP content? I've extended this before.
But this seems way less likely to be extended than stream, and stream we've had to do all these gymnastics in before. The answer is you override the better one.
Well, would it make sense just to have a protected cancellation token property that you could query from your method if you cared?
Real ugly to me.
It does, but means you don't have the question of which one should I override.
Like, it's going to be very easy to lose it, and flow analysis isn't going to tell you. Like, if you override the abstract one, like, you'd have to take any analyzer tool that says, wait, you had a cancellation token in, and you called a thing that took a cancellation token, and you didn't pass it. Like, now you're going to need to teach it. This particular type has a protected property that you should have. Like,
Well, I mean, like, you could have an analyzer that basically does, like, in the same way that it tracks within a method, you could have one that analyzes the symbol info and says you're overriding only one that
but
takes
now you're
your-
going to have to go, like, special case HTTP content.
No, you would just say you're overriding a method. The base type defines the same method with a cancellation token that's also virtual. You should override that one instead.
Fair enough.
Like, I mean, we could handle this as an analyzer.
But
as a
unless we
binary
do,
case.
but if we leave this one abstract, then you're forced to implement it, and then the analyzer tells you you should have overridden the other one instead.
You think I'm fine with the virtual one? What scares me a bit is this dance around how do we avoid cycles, right?
That's
Right, but
what data annotations really had a
but
problem
the-
with in 4.0.
Yeah.
But as soon as someone implements SerializeToStreamAsync to take the cancellation token, it doesn't call the dance one anymore. Like, you don't. So any type that we build, we're going to override the good one, and now the virtual one or the one without cancellation token just forwards the call to the one with cancellation token with no token. Then the virtual one doesn't do the reflection hit. The only time you get it is if you literally you're not one of our types and you've extended this, then we'll do the right thing. So it's the same reason we said it was okay in stream, because all the streams we provide, we overrode the thing and avoided the reflection call.
But stream is complicated for that reason, right?
Well,
I mean,
stream is complicated because it has gone through every evolution that we've ever done.
yeah,
on
we
a
have
framework.
all the permutation. So let me get this straight. So you're basically saying the one that takes cancellation token is virtual. The base implementation would just call the other one.
Yeah.
That makes the API immediately usable. And then we would say in the existing one, we would make it virtual, and we would say basically pseudocode, if SerializeToStreamAsync.
No. That reflection code goes in the one that takes the token. So the new method we won't make abstract because
Yeah,
that would be
of
a
course.
breaking change.
So the new method is virtual.
Its virtual implementation is go ask where the other one is defined. If it's defined on this type, throw not implemented exception, else invoke it. And then the one that is abstract becomes virtual and then calls the one with cancellation token none.
You think that's a good idea?
I think it's what we did for string.
I mean, the in system, you have a high chance of basically, if you want to pass down the cancellation token, it might throw.
No.
What?
If you have an existing one, you've already overridden the one that doesn't take a
No,
cancellation.
I'm saying like I'm an ASP.NET, right? Like I take a random HTTP context instance, a content instance that I don't know.
Yeah.
And I now safely call SerializeToStreamAsync and passing a cancellation token.
Yes, because if they didn't override that one, the default implementation is reflection dispatch back to the other one with the belief that it's not going to cause a cycle.
Maybe I still don't understand. So you're saying the one that takes the cancellation token, the base implementation,
Yes.
will call the other one.
We'll ask reflection, where is this other method actually defined?
Yes.
If it is this type, throw out implement exception, which means they didn't override either virtual. If they've overridden the one that doesn't take a cancellation token, reflection will say this is implemented on a derived type, and then we'll call it.
We don't have a cheap way right now in reflection to ask where is this defined.
But again,
it doesn't have to be cheap, right? Because basically the idea is that you would override one of them, right?
But if you override the wrong one, then you take the hit.
Sure, again. We did it in Stream. Stream is much more sensitive to this than HttpContent.
I don't.
Yeah.
Where is there reflection code in Stream?
It finds read that takes a span. At least I'm pretty sure we did this in Stream. I know we did it in RSA.
No, what that does is it says if I'm not overridden, then I basically rent a buffer, read into the buffer, and then copy the buffer into a span, which is even slower, but it's not reflection.
Okay. Well, that one was capable of working. So I know we've done it in places when we've taken an abstract thing and made it virtual.
Yeah.
And it's the sideways dance of.
No, I've seen that code before. It's just, oh man.
Right. So again, once we start having, if we have the analyzer that says you've overridden the thing that didn't take a cancellation token, you should have overridden the other one, then your perf problem goes away. You're done doing reflection.
What we still end up with, though, is we still end up, in the end, with a type where you absolutely have to override some method, but the method's not abstract, and the type's going to fail unless you override it.
Yes.
Like that's not a tenable position for the framework itself to be in.
Then we say no to this, and we never add cancellation. Those are the only two options. Because if we leave this one abstract, then, I mean, you can boilerplate have to implement it as the other one. It's just going to do no good.
I would honestly rather not do this than make people have great difficulty subclassing the type. Well, or I would rather say, like, there's an HTTP content 2 or something where we actually say, like, no, serialize to stream async with cancellation token is the abstract method, and we make this the one that doesn't take a cancellation token sealed, or something like that.
That's a breaking change.
No, for HTTP context 2 or HTTP content 2, like we introduce a new type that actually has the right surface. Like I would rather do that honestly than that way. When whichever one of the two you subclass, like there is one true abstract method that you override.
I mean, I think this approach doesn't fly, in my opinion, because basically, I think the vast majority of types like this will be implemented by basically what amounts to first parties, and it has way more callers than it has implementers, right? So not exposing things for callers because some implementers have trouble seems the wrong axis.
Yeah, like you define a new type, it throws. You go, oh, now you write override and solve the problem. Like the throw will tell you override this method. Like
because I mean, do we want our networking stack to properly handle cancellation? Yes.
Yeah.
If that means there's a few people that have to do extra work because we just can't express it in the type system, that's unfortunate. But also, maybe that's an area where we can actually generalize it to an analyzer and say, like, maybe we have an attribute that we can put on a method that basically is soft abstract. Every time you see somebody overriding, see somebody deriving from this, and they don't override it, add it to a quick fixer list and say you should override this method.
I would also tend to agree with Imo that it seems to be rare for somebody to do it. I don't think it's like mainstream class, and we've seen like gRPC using it, right? So I could see that most of the implementations would be, closed parties or people who actually know what they do. And the sort of average users would be stuck with the classes we actually do, right? We already have buffer content and we have stream content as implementations, and they would work correctly. But if it gets too complicated, maybe we should wait for Steven to sort of wait in, or I thought this one would be easy, and apparently it's not. So
no, I think honestly like I didn't actually read the proposal. Like this is a relatively easy API from the point of view that all you want is passing and cancellation. What makes this complicated is the fact that it's virtual, and we had this problem in other cases in the framework where when you add an overload to an abstract type, it's generally fine because the idea is that people, that the core functionality is in the base. But this is an example where you extend effectively what the core functionality should have been, right? And that's something that is just fundamentally harder to express in the framework. We don't have a good answer for this, but at the same time, I think like blocking this feature seems the wrong way. The
place that I know
do
that
it.
we did this before, at least as a framework of RSA PKCS1 key exchange deformatter, it asks which, like, am I going to do magic or am I just going to call the right thing? And because we changed the type hierarchy and the right answer changed, and the base method for the right answer throws. So if you had a classic, you'd extended RSA. We broke you. But yeah, if this was a type that everybody generally extended, then I might feel differently. But
Sure.
the notion of like you add a new thing, and yeah, it doesn't work right out of the box, but as long as we give a useful exception of, hey, you realize for HTTP content you have to actually write serialize to stream, right?
So if very few people actually implement this, then why are we even doing a reflection dance in the first place?
I
You don't want to
Stack
stack overflow. That seems bad.
No. I mean, why don't we just say the abstract method stays abstract, the virtual method delegates to the abstract method and throws away the cancellation token? And because we control all the implementers are going to override both.
Because throwing away a cancellation token is
Yeah, but we control all the implementers, so who cares?
okay. Then we make it, if the cancellation token is cancelable, throw, I'm sorry, this type doesn't support cancellation, because we should not let somebody who followed the abstract previously ignore the cancellation token because they didn't know it was.
Yeah, that's what I started to express earlier. What I don't like about this is that basically create a reverse incentive to pass down cancellation tokens, because depending on what instance you're passing, it might blow up.
Yeah, but we do this all the time.
In what way?
Stream, for instance, like the APIs that take a cancellation token, just throw it away if they have to call APM APIs.
No, I think throwing away is fine. What I think is problematic is saying the API that takes a cancellation token, if not overridden, throws an exception, because then the problem is, if I know as a library author or middleware in ASP.NET has to decide whether I call this method, I'm like, well, this API might throw, so I'm less inclined to call it. I'd rather give the API cancellation token, and if it is able to forward it, it will forward it, and if it doesn't, well, then drops it on the floor, which is still better than throwing it and like exploding.
Basically what we do right now, right? So we have a layer where you pass cancellation to HTTP request, and we dump it on the floor somewhere in the middle because we didn't have API how to pass it out.
But what I'm hearing is control all the implementations, and we're going to do the right thing regardless. And at that point, why even do a reflection dance?
Well, I wouldn't say we control them all in the way that we ship them all at once, right? So all I'm saying is that there's a very small set, and it's effectively first party, but it might still be an open-ended set of people, right? But it's kind of like, the users by far outweigh the consumer, the producers, right? And so like not giving the consumers a feature because the producers might actually not be able to do it fast enough. I think that's a
who's saying not give them the feature? Just say, add the API, have the virtual one, call the abstract one, and then say no reflection dance at all. Like if you want to honor
abstract,
leave the abstract one abstract.
So now you're saying the correct answer is always override both.
Yes. There are few implementations, so that's not a hardship.
I mean, in fairness, though, like for performance reasons, you probably want to do this anyway, right? Because if you do the reflection dance, then that's probably not a winning proposition, right?
Fair enough. I mean, but again, like part of this,
I'm fine with that too, because basically, like my hypothetical soft abstract thing would catch that, and you would say, you override both of them, right?
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
weird.
It is weird, but I mean, what we've been justifying to ourselves is we're willing to make implementers jump through hoops.
Yeah, I think that's...
And if we're willing to make them jump through hoops, override both methods.
Yeah. You would have been on the call, you would have been able to participate in that conversation. Let me actually...
I can try to ping him.
Yeah. All right, let me actually change my ruling. We should consider making the existing...
Just going for simplicity.
Leave it abstract.
I mean, There are many places that I wish that we would take in the ref the break and change of marking something abstract.
Yeah.
Like, you move platforms, override this method.
Yeah, I agree.
But the implementation can say virtual. But it would be nice if the refs just start forcing people, like, this is the right one, this is the wrong one. Stop. Like, we could fix stream. Only the span ones are virtual. Or abstract.
All right.
This all comes back to virtual is hard.
Yes.
The guidance for virtual is don't.
.NET 5 is a new major version, and not only that, it's 2 version jumps, so we
Yeah.
should make all these changes.
This is the thing that people don't necessarily understand about extensibility. Like, when you design for one extensibility model, you can't really extend the extensibility model
Correct.
without introducing lots and lots of weirdness.
If you are async, take a cancellation token, even if you can't do anything with it now.
Yep.
And that's why our guidance is take it defaulted so a caller can ignore it if they want to. So yeah, the only question remaining is if we say we should take cancellation token. Okay, our guidance is cancellation token should be named cancellation token, little c big T, and that it should be default. But that was assuming it was public. I don't know how we care about. I don't know if we care about protected. But if we're matching the same syntax there, then do what our guideline says.
For protected, because this is meant to be because this is meant to be implemented, like, I would imagine it should flow through. Because it's the workhorse method.
Right. So cancellation token should be named cancellation token, and it should default or equal default.
Oh, very timely.
We reviewed the async stuff like a month ago. This is old news now.
The default parameters.
Of course, I also said don't use default parameters on virtual methods. So like, we get to pick which rule's wrong.
You're allowed to have conflict. I'm good with cognitive dissonance.
Since this is literally the only valid default for cancellation token. This default is the only compile time constant you can put there.
All right.
Could we go back to the Unsafe.SkipInit real quick? So Jan says this should not be constrained as unmanaged. Nothing else on unsafe is constrained that way, and the constraint just makes the method less useful for no reason. Constraining it as struct is also unnecessary. The problem with unnecessary nice-to-have constraints is that it makes the method impossible to use in other generic code that does not have T.
But when would you ever pass a generic argument to this? Ever.
Apparently, Jan has scenarios or something.
I mean,
If you go to the PR.
the question
which
is he talking practically or is he talking specifically? Because if it's specific, then I feel that if you're using this on an unknown T, get over it.
Yeah, something. I don't
JIT
see.
does the right thing in that scenario, and so
Yeah.
there's no reason for us to block it. Is basically his argument. I asked if maybe we should look at addressing this by having like some if T is value type, and now you can call a generic method constrained to struct. And his response was that would be nice. A number of things would be implemented differently if this existed. Until this language feature exists, the API design should optimize for lack of its existence.
Where's that conversation?
Go to 41995, which is the PR,
I mean, I have.
and then scroll.
Yeah.
No, that you're not on the PR.
I'm not because
Yeah, there's there's no harm to removing it. Like, no harm whatsoever to removing it. It just doesn't do what it purports to do.
Well, it skips initialization, which means it does nothing.
Well, you still get the 0 in it.
Well, you get the 0 init from skip locals init,
Yeah.
but that's the JIT doing it for reference types. And
Yeah.
so if there was already a handle value in there, presumably this does nothing, and therefore the previous value remains. So if you did string s equals new string, skip init s, you would still have the new string value in s.
I mean, remove the constraint, sure. Like, whatever.
I mean, my caliber is low. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm not particularly strong either, and if Jan has scenarios where he thinks it would be useful,
Yeah.
I generally defer to his judgment on it.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't see those scenarios offhand because I can't imagine anyone passing an unknown type in here. But whatever.
So
we have exactly one API that's constrained to where T is struct on unsafe today,
unbox
and that's
API.
unbox where IL requires that constraint for it to be valid.
Yeah. Yep. And it sounds like this follows his overall philosophy too, about like it's all, why block it?
Yeah, there's no safety or security issues. The
Yeah.
JIT will do the right thing.
to be clear, T will be completely unconstrained,
Yeah,
right?
it will be
Correct.
unconstrained. It will just be.
It's just you should only use this API where T is unmanaged. Because that's the only scenario in which this API makes a little sense.
All right. I updated our ruling.
Thank you.
I like that, our ruling.
And I will update the.
So anybody has any context on this one? Who owns SMTP? Does anybody know? Or
It'll be us again.
have you read this? Do you know what this is?
It's basically very similar. There's a send method which currently we don't have. We don't have a way how to pass cancellation in. So if you start sending email, there's no way how you can cancel it essentially.
Right. Did we, like, my understanding was SmtpClient was one of those APIs that we consider legacy and we don't want to touch it anymore. Is that true, or have we changed our mind on that?
We colored it on several classes. SMTP was one, and HTTP listener was another one. But we sort of got to the point that as we see people are still using them, we want to make migration easier. And we talked about it with the group, and we felt this kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's not actually that difficult to do. So
Yeah, if you
basically,
believe
the current plan is that we would use the new people to do it as a training exercise.
right.
So basically, if this gets approved, it would get on whatever kernel maintenance list for easy things to implement, and would go to Prague for somebody to chew on it and basically get it done. And since we have more people, we actually might spend more time fixing bugs and sort of supporting the legacy classes and fixing bugs in those than we had in the past, because it wasn't priority, but now we can kind of afford it. So we'll try to fix some things or improve for small improvements, which are.
Yeah, I would say looking at the API surface, the proposal makes sense to me. If you think it's actually implementable without breaking into jail, and you see value in doing that as a general exercise, I think that makes sense. Anybody else in the room has a different opinion?
I'm looking through the code right now. It looks feasible.
So since we fixed all the streams and the lower layers to actually, so the cancellation actually does work, which it didn't in the past, then I think it makes sense and could be useful.
So my only question is, the proposal is to only do it for send mail, not for send async?
Send mail async. That's what's in the proposal.
No, there's also another method called send async that takes a mail message in an object, or that takes effectively 6 individual values. Could this also be done?
Send. Oh, I see. So send async mail message object is actually the workhorse method. So that would be enlightened about this anyway. But, yeah.
So you're saying the send async one calls them, or?
Send mail async calls send async.
Oh, I see.
So regardless, you would have to have a send async method that took a cancellation token parameter anyway. So may as well make that public.
Gotcha.
It makes sense.
Let me just add this to the list. Also, the existing send async does not return a task. That's amazing API.
It's probably an EAP type method.
But how does SendMailAsync? Oh, maybe that's why I didn't propose it. It's a bit weird that the SendMailAsync is implemented over the other one, but the other one doesn't return tasks. So does this
It's
guy know what he's
EAP.
doing?
Yeah, send async fires a send completed event.
Oh, I see what you're saying. And then SendMailAsync is basically logically the
Task-based one.
The task-based one. Well, in that case, I don't care actually. It's
Yeah.
the cancellation token. The other one, never mind.
It's actually send async cancel. So that's maybe how it's paired together with the send async.
Yeah.
It should be straightforward.
Yeah. All right. Just do usual.
Oh no.
I'm hearing a strong away, or
The best way to see if an email address is valid is to send mail to it. Seriously.
And even that's not necessarily good because not every email server will say this was invalid.
Yeah.
So the only real way is to send a mail and then wait for them to click a link and say, yes. This is me.
Yes. That is, honest to God, the best way to see if an email address is a legitimate email address for someone.
Well, we already have a parse method, and I think the goal for this one was so we don't need to throw. We can basically do validation as best as we can without
Does
throwing.
it work? Like how good is email address or is the mail address type? Like, does it actually understand like mail addresses that people type into systems nowadays?
Yeah, because doesn't it just have to be at least 3 characters where one is an at and then there's at least 1 character on either other side?
yeah, looking at email address attribute.
It used to be a regex.
It basically now just says, do you have an at in there?
Yeah.
And it cannot be the first one, and it cannot be the last one. That's pretty much
So,
it.
aside from sort of the usefulness, or I would say the correctness of the implementation for parsing, right? The goal was to not having to throw.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, like, it's just
Yeah.
that email addresses is one of those hardest things in the world. The question was more like whether the current mail address
Even makes sense.
is even the right API to call to begin with.
Yes.
I mean,
because really that is email address is possibly an email address.
Yeah, well, mail address parser is pretty involved. Yeah, so the reason I looked at the data validation attribute is because those are the ones that are used by ASP.NET pretty much throughout and have seen probably a lot more updates than the system.net mail address parser. So I'm just wondering whether we would even recommend people to use mail address.parse at all.
So should we mark it obsolete?
Yeah, that's the question, right? Because clearly data annotations could have called into it and they decided not to, probably because they would reject too many valid email addresses. So, I mean, I think the API in general seems fine. Like, it follows the normal patterns. It's just, do we even want to bother with promoting that address?
Yeah, and there's also like 4 variables. Oh, and
Display
he's saying
name
there is no
encoding.
parse. There's just a constructor.
Yeah, there's that too. Apparently.
Yeah.
Which means that if we expose TryParse and we follow the design guidelines, we also need. And I would just say no if this isn't what people are supposed to be.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of the gist. If we data. What is this thing called again? Email. All right, so then let me just go back here and let's. All right, so we have still what 50 minutes left.
But one that might be easy. Considering the people that are here in the room right now.
3 is quorum, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can shape the framework in ways.
So I'm just walking them top to bottom right now. So unless you have something more urgent.
Well, it's one that would unblock work on System Numerics.
Fine, be like that. Which one is it?
36379.
You didn't even have to tempt him with ice cream.
I know.
Oh man.
So basically, I'll wait till So we've had the existing System.Numerics.Vector 2, 3, 4, and Vector of T types for almost 10 years now. We just exposed the hardware intrinsics. There's currently both of them internally in the JIT are represented by the same underlying type SIMD, but there's currently no way to do a zero cost conversion between them. These are just proposing extension methods for those types that allow zero cost conversion.
So what would these extension methods do? For instance, if vector of t is 256 bits and you call as vector 128?
So that's listed a little bit further down in the issue. For if it's 256 bits and you call 128, then it truncates the upper. And if it's 128 bits and you call the 256-bit overload, it just zero extends. So basically what you would expect to happen, and the same behavior that happens for vector 128 and vector 256 today. The one note is that this would live in system numerics because vector 2, 3, and 4 are not on corelib. If they were in corelib, I would have proposed that they be exposed on the existing vector 128 and 256 classes where other similar methods are.
So vectors 2, 3, and 4 just take their internal XYZW values and throw them into vector 1.
That's what the software fallback would do.
Yeah.
But for the actual intrinsic implementation, it would basically be a no-op. For vector 2 and 3, if they were in memory, it would do an efficient load. So it would be a normal vector 2 load and then a convert, which is the no-op, and vice versa. But if it's already in register, then it's literally a no-op.
So why wouldn't we just push the types down to call it?
We could, if Jan and others don't see a problem with that.
Well, I'd rather do this than
Yeah.
add another type of extension methods.
Right, and so
Especially because, now the question is, should they be marked as in, for example, right? Because you're effectively...
no, we've said that you don't mark them as in because taking them by ref, the JIT doesn't emit optimal code because it considers it address taken. And it can't be fully elided. It's the same thing that we ended up...
Sure, but does that mean that effectively instance methods would be, no matter what, more efficient?
No, instance methods are less efficient than extension methods in this case because instance methods have this as address taken.
Remember we added a whole bunch of static extension methods to vector 128 and vector 256 before 3.0 shipped? Because they used to be instance methods, I believe.
Yep.
And then it was determined it was more efficient to make them static and take this as a parameter. Like these APIs make sense to me.
Yeah.
Like I've done effectively stuff like this in my...
But where do these other extension methods live?
So all the existing extension methods either live in system numerics vectors in CoreFX or in system private corelib under system runtime intrinsics, depending on where the underlying types live.
Yeah.
If we can get Jan and Carol to say it's okay to move vector 2, 3, 4, as well as quaternion, matrix 4x4, and the other types that depend on it down to corelib, then I'd
But would we have to move the other ones?
Actually, yeah, you're right. They can just
You would only have to move vector 2, 3, 4, right?
So we would... So if we move these down to corelib, then we would put these extension methods on the existing vector 128, vector 256 classes?
Right.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Do we have intrinsics currently living outside of corelib anywhere?
Vector 2, 3, and 4. Vector of T used to, and then we moved it down.
I didn't realize those were actually enlightened by the JET.
Vector 2, 3, 4, and vector of T are all special cased in the JIT.
Well, vector of T is in private corelib, so that at least is understandable.
It wasn't until 3.0.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds to me like we should just bite the bullet because, I mean, yeah, it seems beneficial to just have the specialized types all in corelib anyways.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's fine with me, and I can talk with Carol and Jan about that.
Yeah, that would be my vote as well. Move those into corelib, remove vector extensions, and put them on the existing static types. So does that mean this just needs to come back around in like a week or two?
Or we could just approve today and say, here's
Yeah.
the shape, move the types down to core lib.
What types would need to get moved down aside from vector 2, 3, and 4? Just those?
Just vector 2, 3, and 4.
That seems reasonable to me.
That would also, I believe, allow us to remove the special casing in the JIT that says look for intrinsic types in either core lib or System.Numerics.
Because the types, the reference for the type is still in System Numerics vectors,
Yeah.
even for vector T. That's fine.
And System.Numerics.Vector already has it.
Okay. I would vote approve. Subject, bring those down.
Yeah, market does need to work. I mean, like if we can't move it down, then I think I would take another look at it.
Okay.
But
So it's approved if we can move down and otherwise needs work?
basically, but I can't express that, right?
Well,
Like
I mean,
that-
you could just type it out.
I could type it out on his behalf.
well, just file the other one then, or edit the proposal or whatever. Like it's easier because then,
Yeah.
it's very hard to approve hypotheticals,
Right.
because then if the hypothetical changes, then it's
Because
bad.
I am running into this a little bit in what I'm working on as well, because I'm working on some encoding stuff that is maybe these APIs will change if we bring stuff down to into private core lib.
I'll just call out in a comment that we said about an hour and 37 minutes in that this is approved if we get to move the types down.
Yeah, you don't have to include the timeline because once I click the send email button, it will already be time coded.
Okay.
I mean, in the vicinity. All right. So I think
7 minutes, we can do it.
one of whom started the meeting. What is happening? Yeah, how about we take a look at this one? Any overloads of read-only span to system network information physical. Why parse and parse?
Physical address being MAC address?
If that's what it is, yeah.
Oh, yeah, out physical address MAC, okay.
This one came from a PowerShell that they parse some log files and they said the performance is somewhat critical for them or important for them.
Okay, and I updated my proposal with a comment at the bottom showing the if the types are moved down the.
Okay. So what I would say here is the same thing that we've been doing for other parse methods. We already have a parse method that takes a string and returns a physical address. So have an overload that takes read-only-span and char, sure, makes sense. For TryParse, we would probably have two overloads, one that takes a string, one that takes a read-only-span. And the out parameter would be named value, just to match all other TryParse methods we have.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Right, like it didn't quite connect it all.
So we already have today
A parse method.
a parse method that takes a string address and returns a physical address.
Yep.
So the parse read-only-span is just an analog, sure,
Yep.
whatever. There's no TryParse method today.
Yes.
So if we added a TryParse method, we would probably do two things. First, we would have an overload that takes a string in addition to an overload that takes a read-only-span and char.
Yes.
And the out parameter will be named value, just to match the existing guidelines.
Oh, I see. Yes, yes.
But
Other than
like
that,
beyond that, I don't see any changes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree. And you have a guy who's actually working on it from community. There were some formats we didn't support and whatnot, so they didn't require API changes, but we have champion who's willing to put effort into it. So
Yeah.
and again, we have sort of first party interested in getting this done. So should be easy and cheap for us.
Yeah.
It should be PRs linked or formats, blah blah.
So you would have string address and then out physical MAC address value. Is that right? Sharp.
Like there might be some other considerations, like do we want get address bytes that returns a read-only span of byte in addition to a byte array? Like we could consider that if it comes back.
Sorry, we would want like a byte array one.
So we also have a method get address bytes that returns a byte array. Do we need an equivalent that returns a span? Like maybe we just wait for people to ask.
Yeah.
This makes me think, like, I'm looking at all of the code here and how we have so much hex parsing in the framework. Like, we should just add, like, char.parse hex or something. Given A through F0 through 9, it just returns 0.
Speaking of which, didn't we already add a method that gives me a hex encoded string without hyphens? Because bit converter to string always gives me the hyphens, and I always do dot replace with empty.
Yeah.
But I thought at some point we saw in a review and somebody proposed it.
Yeah, I thought we discussed something like this 1 or 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But did we already ship the API
I
or
don't
did we
recall
build it?
shipping that.
Because that one, yeah.
We had talked about having an operation status-based API for stuff like that.
But no, I want a string. I'm a lazy developer. I don't.
Well, it should be called getString, not toString.
Well, there's that too. It might have been called actually getString. I don't know.
No, it's not. It's called toString because we're all horrible people.
All right, so we have 2 minutes left, so there's no point. And plus, I want to run to another meeting. All right, then I would say this is it for today. Yeah.
All
So
right.
this time I don't know whether you saw this in the video, but no, I actually include the comments in the video itself. So for prosperity.
Okay, I found the issue we reviewed last time. It was 10013, and you commented, "It seems we should survey what internal implementations we have and what all the places are. We expose something similar."
It's still open, right?
Yeah, it's you changed it from ready for review to suggestion.
Oh, it's assigned to me. Ha.
So you're the reason that I have to call to replace. Like
all of my GitHub notification emails go into a spam box or whatever.
yeah, I know that problem.
I just go through them every morning at like 7 a.m.
Yeah.
All right. Bye bye, guys.